This is Proxy Countdown. Welcome to the big show for the week of October 21, 2024, alongside my tag team partner, Matt Moscardi. I'm Damion Rallis. On today's countdown, the glass cliff crumbles at CVS. Walt Disney keeps trying to replace Bob Iger. Accelerated retirements at Southwest Airlines. An angry shareholder mob at Klarna. And on the big vote, Lam Research's high-priced board. Let's move over to our trade wire. Lots of stories to report this week. Let's start with CVS Health Corporation, where CEO Karen Lynch is out after about 3 years of tenure, and she's been replaced by David Joyner. At the same time, independent board chair Roger Farah has been promoted to executive chair. So it makes you wonder if Roger Farah had a role in getting rid of Karen Lynch in the first place.
How many times is an executive chair independent? That doesn't,
No,
it's executive
no,
by definition, right?
Was independent formerly and now is an executive chair. And according to our data, this would not surprise users of our database because their influence was actually tied at 16%, so they were both equally powerful. So again, should not come as a surprise if you use freeflowanalytics.com. In Australia, one of their biggest companies, WiseTech, which is I think like a $20 billion market cap. WiseTech founder Richard White has resigned as CEO and director. But this is what the board says when you are the company's biggest shareholder and control 44% of board influence. Quote, the board has agreed, following Mr. White's request, that he will stand down as a director and as CEO with immediate effect, take a short period of leave. When Mr. White returns from leave, he will commence a new full-time long-term consulting role focused on product and business development. So to be clear, this is a 10-year term, a 10-year contract where the company will pay him $1 million a year. And his new title, of all things, talk about an ego boost. His new title is founder and founding CEO. That's his new title.
Oh, he couldn't be one. He couldn't just be.
So let me catch you up to why he is leaving in the first place for a short period of time. So Mr. White has faced claims from multiple women that he bought them houses and invested in their businesses in exchange for sex. The lurid allegations got worse from there, including reports of violence, intimidation, retaliation. WiseTech board chair Richard Dammery, who announced an independent inquiry, whatever that means, said, quote, recent weeks have been challenging and uncertain ones for our people. So I guess not for any of the women involved in these allegations.
No, they weren't. No, there's no challenge there. They have houses.
Now, he's saying recent weeks, but in 2019, former board member Christine Holman, right, a woman, resigned from the board and accused White of, quote, sustained intimidation and bullying. So that was 5 years ago. While the board expressed ongoing confidence in the company's leadership, shareholder pressure ultimately forced the board's hand following the founder and founding CEO's extremely public dispute with a former lover in federal court. So the board wasn't going to do a single thing about this, but it just got too ugly in the media and it forced the board to do something, I guess. And despite all this, this is what analysts say. This is Roy Van Koolen over at Morningstar. He said, quote, given our assessment of WiseTech as a product-led company, we consider White's continued involvement in this area of the business to be a positive outcome for shareholders. So it's a shareholder-friendly universe, right? Nothing else matters as long as we're selling product.
He's the Australian Vince McMahon, only he sells widgets.
Yeah, and I'm sure if for those of us in America, if we knew all the lurid details of the story, there'd be some outrage that this guy is coming back to a 10-year contract and not going anywhere, and that the board refuses to do a thing about it. But how about that? You don't see very often directors retiring and accusing the founding CEO of sustained intimidation and bullying, and the board still won't make a move on him. It's a pretty crazy story. So that's what's going on there at WiseTech. Over at the Walt Disney Company, according to an 8K filing, the company announced that board chair Mark Parker will be resigning in January. Now, oddly enough, that's all the 8K said. But if you were smart enough to click and open the Exhibit 99.1 that's attached to the 8K filing, you would have learned that former Morgan Stanley CEO and its current executive chair, James Gorman, will become Disney's new board chair. I have no idea why that was hidden in the filing. I don't know what's going on at Disney with their succession planning. It's always very dramatic, but this is the latest stage. According to the company, James Gorman will be the one tasked now with replacing Bob Iger once again.
Yeah, he's got. That means he's double chairing. Is that how much time does James Gorman have if he's an executive chair somewhere else too?
ServiceNow has appointed Amit Zavery as its new chief product officer and chief operating officer. He will come with a Golden Hello cash bonus of $3 million and a Golden Hello equity bonus of $29 million.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's $32 million total. And I guess this generous award is to make up for the fact that his lifestyle will be in upheaval, of a lot of change, because the ServiceNow headquarters is actually 11 miles away from his current employer, Alphabet. So it's an 11-mile
Are they
move.
paying for relocation services?
Well,
I hope so.
It's 11 miles, right? $32 million. Also at Molina Healthcare, they're giving CFO Mark Keim a magical one-time stock award worth $17 million. So, no, I don't. Yeah.
Man, to be a CFO these days.
And a blow to our very own Matt Moscardi. His favorite, I'm speaking for you, Matt, your favorite greenwashy director of all time, Greg Goff, is stepping down at ExxonMobil, right?
Yeah, just a quick reminder, that is the director that engine number one, the environmental activist investor, put on the Exxon board to help pivot them towards a low-carbon future. Greg Goff was at Marathon Oil and fought the EPA and all carbon regulations, joined the Exxon board, and helped them sue Arjuna Capital, who was asking for environmental disclosure. So I'd call that a greenwash win.
The best greenwash director we've ever seen.
Ever.
Bella Baharia has joined the board of the Coca-Cola Company. Bella is the chief content officer at Netflix. So while this is potentially a head-scratching addition, it ignores the reality that both Coca-Cola and Netflix are two of the world's most powerful drug companies, reinforcing one of my pet peeves, which is that I think a lot of the large cap companies are just misclassified, right? I mean, it makes perfect sense to me that Coca-Cola would want someone from Netflix on its board, although I think a lot of investors are thinking, what's the deal here?
Yeah. If Bella was from Deere and Company, that'd be weird, but this makes sense.
H.B. Fuller board chair Lee Matau is resigning. First, he will step down as chair on January 21st, 2025, and then as a director on January 23rd, 2025. So it makes you wonder what the hell will be going on at H.B. Fuller on January 22nd. What do you think happens in... Right, it's
hopefully that's a Sunday, so they can relax.
It reminds me of an Aliens movie where you go into the chamber, the airlock, right, where you get rid of all the pressure. I don't know what's going on there with that resignation pattern. And finally, in a move that will shock investors across the globe, J.P. Morgan Chase has appointed a director named Brad Smith.
Oh wow, yeah, that is shocking.
Let's move over to our proxy cage matches. The big news is out of Southwest Airlines, where the company has seemingly ended its feud with activist investor Elliott Management. In a deal to avert a proxy fight, CEO Bob Jordan will keep his job. I think that's the most important thing here. While executive chair and former CEO Gary Kelly will accelerate his retirement. Although he will remain as chairman emeritus, I don't understand that, which means that he will still be in the boardroom. He will still be at all board meetings. So I not really leaving. Yeah.
I think they meant they'll accelerate his walking to the next chair down.
Okay.
That's what they're going to do.
And also part of the agreement, Elliott Management will name 6 directors to the board. 6 Southwest Airlines directors will be stepping down. I love the precision of this filing over at Southwest Airlines. It said that Gary Kelly will retire, this is their language, at 11:59 p.m. Central Time on November 1st, 2024.
Like at 11:58, he's still going to be writing emails. Yeah.
So that's what's going on at Southwest Airlines. And again, we covered this in another one of our shows, but it seems to be like it's a one-to-one skills swap, right? They're firing some people who come from banks and from aviation. They're replacing kind of some similar people. So this seems to be a bit of a ego move for Elliott and an ego move for current Southwest Airlines CEO Bob Jordan, who keeps his job, right?
Yeah, the only exception to the skill swap between the directors is they did get rid of 2 current academics and replace them with 2 ex-airline executives. I did not say that any one of those were successful in what they did, but that was the one thing that changed in terms of a skill outcome.
Activist investor Jana Partners has bought a 5% stake in Lam Weston, criticizing the potato product supplier of self-inflicted missteps, which either means that the fries are soggy or the directors are burnt. I don't really know what self-inflicted missteps are at a French fry company.
I think it's when you put them in your mouth too fast and it burns the roof of your mouth.
Activist investor JCP Investment Management has taken a 2% stake in the Cheesecake Factory. I know you're excited about this one, Matt, and is urging the restaurant operator to spin off 3 of its smaller brands into a separate public company. These brands include North Italia, an Italian casual dining company, Flower Child, a health-focused fast casual chain, and Culinary Dropout, which I guess sells pretzel bites and fried chicken. I've never heard of these restaurants.
I didn't even know that. What kind of public company? How big of a public company could those 3 restaurants be?
I mean, I'm just amazed that
they got 12 locations.
Cheesecake Factory itself is a publicly traded company. Just so our listeners know, the board at Cheesecake Factory is dominated by one single man, chair and CEO David Overton, who co-founded the company with his parents in 1978. It's also dominated by the pasta carbonara with chicken, which clocks in at 2,200 calories and 150 grams of fat.
Well, can I say,
incredible.
When I saw that JCP was taking a stake and they wanted to break up the company, I thought they just meant the menu.
I thought break up the carbonara into 5 different portions.
I thought the menu was so thick they were just going to slim it down.
And speaking of unhealthy, activist investors JCP Management, which we just talked about, and Jumana Capital have respectively taken a total of 12% stakes in casual dining restaurant chain Red Robin Gourmet Burgers. Matt, we talked about this recently. Activist investors, what? They either target media, airlines, or disgusting food. That's it.
What is that? What is that about? I don't understand
not really
that at
clear.
all.
Yeah. Let's move over to our vote results table. The winner of the week is Drew Armstrong at Paycor HCM. 99.94% of shareholders supported her election to the company's board. I think it's because just of her nickname, Drew. That's why they're voted for her. Because it's hard saying Drury. That's a weird, it's a odd first name.
Yeah. It was a vote for use your nickname.
Yeah, use your nickname. At Seagate Technology, 35% of shareholders said no to director Mark Adams. This is an interesting one. Mark was nominated by the board to fill the vacancy from a retiring director, but he previously served as a director for the company from 2017 to 2022. What do you make of this one? So what we're learning here is that shareholders say yes to everyone who's currently on the board, but maybe they secretly do hate them, but they don't want you back. But they won't vote against you the first time. I don't understand this one.
But they clearly don't hate him enough because it was only 35% against, so he still wins.
Okay, but we know
he still wins.
But we know according to data that is a monumental number, 35%.
Your pet peeve is they should actually say 30% if that's a controlling share, according to most data providers. That should count as effectively getting voted off the board entirely.
Well, according to your data, Matt, if you look at the bell curve or whatever, it should be like 10%, right? Because aren't most directors voted in at like a clip of like 98%, 96%. So even 10% is a major betrayal.
I think they're just confused. I think that's what's happening here. I think that's just confusion.
And finally, at Swedish company Klarna, one of their biggest companies, Klarna, 87% of shareholders voted to remove Mikhail Walter from the board. Now, this is another fascinating case. Of course, the company gave no reason for this decision, right? Why would they have anything to say? But according to Bloomberg, the reason why he was removed from shareholders is that Michael questioned the governance decisions at the company, including a bonus scheme that he said could hand Klarna co-founder and CEO Sebastian Siemiatkowski as much as $35 billion in the upcoming year. So there's your reason. That's a pretty good reason to get rid of the director, right? I mean...
So the director did not think it was a good idea to hand that much money to the co-founder and chief executive.
And that's the key word there is founder. He's the founder of the company. Yep.
And the investors agreed with the founder in that case.
Well, I don't know offhand what the CEO's voting power is. It does. I was assuming that it was large enough to get rid of the director, but you're
I'm
right.
sure it's 100%. Like, yeah,
it is a bit odd.
He owns 7% of the company.
That's it.
As of 2023.
So it is amazing.
I don't know if he has dual class shares.
This is a little bit like Swedish's Elon Musk, right? They're just pissed off that anybody would question what their great leader is doing or earning.
How dare they? Yeah.
87%. That's an impressive number. That's all I have. Let's move over to the big vote where we are covering the company Lam Research. Their annual meeting is coming up on November 5th, 2024. My very cursory takeaway, Matt, is that unlike a lot of the companies that we cover and in general, it's actually a above average performance according to our metrics, hitting 635 overall. Looking at their skill sets, they seem relatively well aligned with what you would expect from a company that does something to do with chips, computer chips, right?
Deep analysis you come here for.
These companies always anything to do with computer chips and hardware and software. They confuse me. I mean, I'm gonna be the first to admit. I mean, I don't know what they're doing. I know you know. That's why you're here. So
I can pretend.
Why don't you help us out with Lam Research?
So look, this is a board full of superstars, all-stars, starting players. They're high performers. As you said, their skills. 90% of this board has like skills aligned with the sector that they're in. In fact, their closest competitor is Applied Materials, and their boards look almost exactly alike. These are boards that are designed to do a thing, and the thing that they do is oversee the manufacturing of fab equipment.
Yes, I don't know what that means.
Equipment used to make computer chips. That's what they do. So you got to make a big warehouse. In order to make a computer chip, it's got to be super clean. It's got to be super precise, like to atomically precise, right? Like, so the equipment is highly calibrated, highly specialized. So these are engineers, these are computer scientists, these are, and then you mix in a bunch of economic skills because they're working in capital markets, and this is an all-star board.
Yeah, and just to interrupt you briefly, what's important here, not only is it an all-star board, but there's a great balance of influence on this board. There are at least 6 directors who hold at least 10% of the influence. So it's not like there's any single figure dominating. It seems to be that there's a lot of good, right, advice and input. And
not only that, it's a rare company that you don't see this very much in the United States anymore, where the CEO is not the chair of the board. The chair is an independent chair entirely, and that doesn't happen that much anymore. The CEO is usually the chair of the board. So the chair here is Abhijit Talwalkar, is the chair of the board. Actually has more influence than the CEO on the board.
Yeah.
Which is exactly how, when you think about accountability, how a board is supposed to run, is it not?
Well, not to mention that he sits on 3 of the board's committees, so you can see his influence right there. And his background actually suggests is a good choice for this. As former CEO at LSI Corporation, currently sits on companies like Advanced Micro Devices. So, this is makes sense.
So when I looked at like all of the basic stats, like how connected these board members were, there were some connections, but not a lot. Like how I looked at everything. I combed through everything about their backgrounds, their bios, and I walked away and I felt like, wow, this board is fabulous.
Okay.
I don't know. I thought like, oh, end of show, right? Like Damien's going to be stoked because we can just end the show immediately. But that's when I started looking. I noticed something that I thought was really weird because I looked at the director pay. Okay, I asked a question like, oh, well, I don't know that I'd vote anyone off this board necessarily. I do make 2 suggestions for votes off, and investors tend to actually agree with these suggestions because the one thing that you noticed was 2 of the or 3 of the directors got more than 10% of the vote against, right? There were a couple directors who got votes against,
including the chair that we just talked about. Oddly, I think you have some more insight there, but he got 16% against his reelection last year, which seems odd to me.
It would seem odd given like the level of performance of the directors themselves.
Yeah, but maybe it's the tenure. However, he's been there for over 10 years.
The company has plateaued. The company's net income actually dropped for the first time in the last year.
Okay.
It seems to have been this big boom after the pandemic, and then it's just leveled off. And we're not seeing any new net profit. We're not seeing any new TSR in particular. It's relatively plateaued, and there's some question about that. On top of that, it seems like investors are targeting the longest tenured directors. But I noticed something about pay because I thought to myself, this is a pretty all-star board of humans, right? Like when you just take them as a team, it's a pretty all-star board. What would you pay an all-star board? And I noticed that Talwalkar, as the chair of this board, was incredibly well paid.
Yeah, chair and again sits on 3 different committees.
His summary compensation was over $500,000 last year, which, when you look at board pay for non-insiders, right? Like that is really high. That's in the top 5% of board pay for U.S. companies. So he's a superstar and he's getting paid like a superstar. But here's what I noticed about this. And here might be the tip-off of the risk of this company, right? Because they're making a thing that you'd think in an AI chip war is incredibly useful. However, only 3 of the company's customers represent 20% of their revenue. Those customers are all in 92% of their revenue comes from Asia, comes from abroad. It's not U.S. chip makers, but some comes from U.S. chip makers, but 92% is from abroad. What I noticed was the mix of pay that these directors were getting, stock versus cash, went from 2/3 stock in 2012 to 50-50 stock and cash in 2024.
Okay.
So not only are they getting paid a lot more, but they're taking a lot of that in cash now when they were taking stock before. This doesn't take into account what they actually took home, right? This is just like how they're splitting it. So I noticed that it's plateauing. At the same time, directors are effectively taking stock off the table. These directors are getting 1-year equity grants, not 3-year equity grants like an executive might, which means every single year they can cash out.
Right.
They're getting cash to be there, and then they can cash out. The cash portion of pay went up more than 200% in 12 years. It's basically a 19% raise every single year for cash, and the stock went down. So I looked at Tal Walker as the highest paid board member. I did a deep dive into his pay. There is no disclosure about the necessarily whether or not they cashed out. You can go through all the forms.
They're required to do that, right? The director compensation.
Form 4s will have some of this data, but it's incredibly complicated because you can't tell, whether or not they're gifting it, there's all sorts of nuance about how much they're actually getting. So here's what I did. I estimated using I estimated the what he might have actually taken home based on how much stock he had at the end of any given year and the stock price at the time, and said, okay, let's assume that whatever the difference is in their stock holdings every single year, they might have sold some, they might have kept more, they're granted some, they're whatever. Let's see what I can assume for the actual value of their pay package for that year, much in the way we do with CEOs now. What I could figure out was he took home about $4 million in stock sales, and his current current stock holdings are worth just under $12 million. So in reality, from 2011 to 2024, he got $15.8 million in stock sales and stock value. Wow. And then you add into it the cash he got paid, and he made just under $18 million in 13 years. That's an average annual pay of about $1.4 million per year. Versus what was disclosed in 2024 is $520,000. He's making more than double that, nearly 3 times that.
It's funny you cite this figure doubling. At the same time, he's the chair of the board, which is supporting the pay practices that out to the executive officers, right? Now, from 2021 to 2024, the long-term equity target payout for the CEO, Timothy Archer, has also doubled for no apparent reason. Right. So it started at $11 million. It's up to $21.5 million in this current cycle. So I don't know, right? I mean, everyone's helping each other here, right? And there's no really good reason why you would increase that payout like that.
So the stock went gangbusters over.
But that's not a reason to increase the target award. So that the executives and directors will still benefit from increased share price. You don't have to increase their share award.
I think what is happening here, right, is the stock went gangbusters. But I think, and this is conjecture, the plateau in the sales. And in fact, one of the things I noticed is the company's now making more money from its customer service than it is from sales of machines, which suggests to me that they knew this was coming and they pay while the pay is good, right?
Before it all comes down.
You can see down the road and you can say, this is an unsustainable amount of purchases.
Yeah, because how long is that going to last?
How many giant fab making machines can we sell?
Yeah.
It's not sustainable. They're selling more and more into customer service, and they're paying themselves more and more. In fact, when you break down the chair's pay, I said it's just under $1.4 million per year. I estimated based on the number of meetings. Now they have to disclose the number of meetings, right? There were, he went to 246 total meetings in 13 years, according to their disclosure, not make believe, right? That's 246 meetings that Tal Walker went to ostensibly over a 13-year tenure on this board. If we assume some things about how long those meetings take and the amount of prep you have to do, right? Mm-hmm. We assume full board meetings are probably all day. We assume the side meetings that they're having, the committee meetings, some of them are going to take a long time, but most of them are going to be pretty short. How many times are you going to talk about pay? He had 13 pay meetings one year. How many times are you going to talk about, what are you going to talk about? For 13 meetings a year. There's 12 months. Once a month you get on a call.
You're going to high five each other is what you're going to do.
You're going to say, is everyone getting paid? Yeah. And then you're done. But I made some generous assumptions, and what I came to was it was probably about 1,000 hours of work in 13 years. Figure 100 hours a year, maybe roughly, is what you're putting in. That comes to, in the end, my estimate came to about $7,800 an hour that the chair got paid, which if he was an executive at the company working 60 hours a week, he would make $24.4 million per year.
Okay.
24.4. That is almost exactly what an executive gets paid. That's almost exactly what a named executive officer or CEO gets paid at any of these companies.
But you did suggest at the beginning that this was an all-star board that ostensibly is performing well. So what is your takeaway here?
So that is the question.
Yeah.
That's the question I'm posing basically to an investor. A superstar team, this is a highly paid board, right? You are paying them like highly paid executives
like
on an hourly basis.
Like part-time executives, essentially.
In fact, I did the stupid thing, which is to look, his per meeting equivalent is the same as the following celebrity speakers. I looked up celebrity appearance fees.
Yeah.
Basically, every time he shows up to a meeting, it's the same as if you hired Joseph Stiglitz, the American economist, to show up at the meeting.
So how much is that? How much money are you talking about for like an hour?
It's about $70,000 per appearance, right?
Oh, wow.
So it's Joseph Stiglitz.
Yeah.
How about the entire band of the Alabama Shakes?
Okay.
Every time you have a meeting, you want them to perform at the meeting.
In the South, yeah.
Eric Trump.
Oh, okay.
The Trump son.
Yeah.
Emmett Smith.
Oh,
like
what's he going to
you
talk
want him
about?
to sign.
Yeah.
You want him to sign everybody football and then walk out.
That
right?
sounds
like
as boring as the compensation committee meetings. Yeah.
What about Killer Mike?
Oh.
He would do an entire set for $70,000.
I like that. Yeah.
But all I'm saying is you're paying them at the level you pay celebrities and top executives to sit there and meet year in and year out.
Again,
is it worth
that's
it?
what you're asking.
Are you getting something?
Do you have an
out of
answer?
And my answer is
before you get to your answer, I will say that you do wonder, like, what are the shareholders upset about? So what we saw was at least 10% of votes, which is high, as we've established.
Right.
At least 10% of votes against. Now, it would look like all 4 members of the nomination committee is my guess. Although that also happens to include all 3 of the longest tenured directors at the company.
Correct. Yeah.
So are they are they suggesting maybe that they're not worth it, that things need to change here? What do you think is going on with that vote and with your answer, if they're worth it? What do you think?
So I think at some point, when revenue goes down, net income is flat, TSR is flat, and it's multiple years of that. If you look at the curve, it's multiple years where we are not getting anything for our money, but we are paying everyone on this board like a superstar director to deliver long-term returns.
And again, it's the 3 long tenured directors that control the nomination committee. So they're the ones who are really controlling the makeup of the board.
I think the time is now to say, we had a good run.
Yeah.
It's time to move on.
Yeah.
My recommendation is you vote against Chair Talwalkar. You do not make the CEO the chair. You need a different independent chair in there.
He had the highest votes against to back up your point. I mean, 16% against his reelection.
He's made a lot of money. He's long tenured. He's delivered a lot of returns to you. But now, after 13 years, I think you can reasonably say you're no longer independent. You've been here for a long time. It's time to move on. I also suggest you vote against Eric Brandt.
Also on the nomination committee, 12% votes against last year. Yeah.
And he's the head of the compensation committee. And I have a question for you. Yeah. Does the compensation committee actually review the director compensation also? I think they outsource it to consultants, but I think they control it, don't they?
The
compensation committee
and then the
controls
CEO
both.
rubber stamps it. Because why would you upset your members of your compensation committee that's doubling your equity?
So at this point, the two longest tenured directors who are running the compensation committee and the board as a whole, who in their own right are superstars, I take nothing away from them. They're getting votes against them. The company is plateaued, but you're paying yourself and changing the cash amount that you're taking as directors such that you benefit without having skin in the game in terms of equity in the game. Well, I think it's time for a change. Those are my votes against.
I want to throw in one more director to that, and that's Michael Cannon, who is actually the chair of the nomination committee, who was 11% votes against last year, who has 12% of board influence. So if you combine all three, you've suddenly opened up nearly 50% of board influence. It could make a real major culture shift there. And one of the reasons why I just pick out Michael Cannon is that he's an outlier in our data for basically underperforming. He comes up.
He's the underperformer.
He underperforms overall. He hit 445 compared to the rest of the board at 635. He underperforms in carbon. He underperforms in controversies. He's an underperformer. He's long tenured. He chairs a nomination committee. So I would add him to that list, if I may.
I will accept your addition.
All right. Unfortunately, no shareholder proposals for us to talk about at this company. I will say, as I've already pointed out for Say and Pay, CEO Timothy Archer, and maybe because of this well-established, highly paid board that you've spoken about, has seen his pay, magically rise from $18 million last year to $30 million this year, mostly because for some discretionary reason that we don't know, the compensation committee has just keeps giving him more equity, right? Just keeps increasing the target value of his equity award. We don't know why. So that's what's going over there, Say and Pay. I don't know what you feel about that.
You know what? In general, I say no on Say on Pay just because. But I do think the contrast here that is more interesting to me. If you're going to say no on pay, then you should say no to the pay committee, and you should start with the pay committee chair, which is what we're talking about, right? We're talking about people who are willing to pay themselves a significant amount even after they plateaued and revenue is declining at this point. And I think actually this assessment is the important assessment. It's not just the executives you're paying. You need to know whether or not you're paying your board members like they're executives at the company on a comparable basis, right? They show up for, 15 or 20 meetings a year. If you're paying them at the same rate you're paying an executive, and you look at their mix and they're getting 50-50 equity cash, where the executive's getting 90-10 cash in equity, something about that is misaligned also. The directors are there for 7 years. So I know this is CEO pay, but I think actually these things are inexorably linked. I think you should, in general, I vote against pay. I don't really care. I think you vote against the pay committee chair in this case. And I think you actually need to align the director pay and the CEO pay, and they're not.
So that's a vote no against pay, a vote no against compensation committee chair Eric Brandt, a vote no against nomination committee chair Michael Cannon, and then a vote no against the overall board chair Abhijit Talwalkar. I think all three of them long tenured directors to boot, and all got more than 10% votes against the last meeting. That's it. Anything else?
That's all I got.
That's the Proxy Countdown for the week of October 21st, 2024. Join us next week when we jump back into the alternative democracy pool, forever on the lookout for shareholder sharks, floating band-aids, and wayward directors.